In this video, we will take a look at the power-to-power rule, where you are raising exponents to a power. There are two rules to keep in mind. The zero exponent rule. Any term raised to the zero power is 1. The second rule, that is new, is to multiply the exponents by each other. So, when you're doing power to power, you will multiply your exponents. This is different than when you are multiplying monomials times polynomials, where you added your exponents. Let's take a look at these examples. Example number 1, x to the third to the fourth power. You will multiply your exponents, giving you x to the 12th. For your second example, you have a coefficient of 2 in your term. You need to raise 2 to the fourth power. 2 to the fourth power is 16. Now, you're going to raise x to the third to the fourth power, giving you x to the 12th. Then you raise y to the second to the fourth power, giving you y to the 8th. In your next example, you are going to raise negative 3r s to the third t to the fourth to the second power. Start by raising negative 3 to the second power. That means negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. r to the second power is r to the second power. S to the third power raised to the second power is s to the sixth power, because you multiply 3 times 2 to give you 6. T to the fourth power to the second power is t to the 8th. For your next example, you have xy to the fifth raised to the third power. You will start out by multiplying x being raised to the third power, and then raising y to the fifth to the third power as well. Remember, x has the invisible exponent of 1. 1 times 3 gives you the exponent of 3. And y has the exponent of 5. 5 times 3 gives you the exponent of 15. The next example will have two steps. Step 1 is to apply the power-to-power rule. For the first set of parentheses, I will raise x to the third, y to the second power. I will now raise xyz to the third power. Now, you have two monomials that are going to be multiplied. Remember, when you multiply monomials, you add the exponents. This gives you a final answer of x to the 9th, y to the 5th, z to the 3rd. For the last example on this page, you have 15x to the 12th, y to the 15th, z to the 20th, raised to the 0 power. Remember, the rule is any term raised to the 0 power is 1. For the next example, you have 2x squared raised to the third power. You will raise 2 to the third power, which means 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. And you will raise x squared to the third power, which means x squared times x squared times x squared, which gives you x to the 6th. For the next example, you are going to start out by raising 3 to the fourth power. That is 81. Now you will raise x to the fourth power, and then you will raise y to the fifth to the fourth power. Giving you a final answer of 81, x to the fourth, y to the 20th. For the next example, you are going to raise negative 6 to the third power, then r to the third power, then s to the 7th to the third power, and then finally t to the 5th to the third power. We'll start by raising negative 6 to the third power, which is negative 216. R to the third is R to the third. S to the 7th to the third is S to the 21st. T to the 5th to the third is T to the 15th. For the next example, I will raise x to the 8th power and then y to the 7th to the 8th power. This gives you the final answer of x to the 8th, y to the 56th. This next example looks a little different. Notice how the coefficient, negative 7, is outside of the parentheses. Since negative 7 is outside of the parentheses, it will not be raised to the 6th power. You will simply bring it down in your first step. Now, you will raise the terms that are inside of the parentheses to the 6th power, starting with your first variable of x. X to the 4th to the 6th power will give you x to the 24th. Y to the 2nd to the 6th will give you y to the 12th. And lastly, z to the 6th will give you z to the 6th. This is your final answer. Notice this next example has two parentheses that have power to power. We know it's power to power because we notice the exponent on the outside of the parentheses. I will start by evaluating the first set of power to power, which is r s to the third t to the 4th raised to the 2nd power. Now I will evaluate the second set of power to power, which is 2 rst raised to the 3rd power. Now that you have these two terms, they can be multiplied. Remember, when multiplying, you add your exponents when you have the same base. Your final answer comes out to be 8 r to the 5th, s to the 9th, t to the 11th. Next example is negative 12, a, b to the 10th, c to the 25th, d to the 13th, raised to the 0 power. Any term raised to the 0 power is 1. I will go through a couple more examples. Some of these examples will be monomials times monomials, and some of them will apply power to power. This first example of a b to the 2nd times a to the 3rd b is a monomial times a monomial. Therefore, you will add your exponents. This next example is power to power. We notice it's power to power because we have an exponent on the outside of our parentheses. This next example is two sets of power to power. We will evaluate each set of power to power, and then we will take the answer and multiply the monomial times the monomial to give us our final answer. From power to power, you will get 49 x to the 4th, y to the 6th, times 16 x squared, y squared. Now, you will multiply your coefficients and add your exponents. giving you a final answer of 784, x to the 6th, y to the 8th. The next example is power to power. Start by multiplying negative 7 times negative 7, which means negative 7 to the second power, which is positive 49. Then raise x to the second power, which is x to the 4th, and then raise y to the second power to give you y to the 4th. The next example is not power to power. Notice how there's not an exponent on the outside of these parentheses. Therefore, I will simply multiply my coefficients and add my exponents. This next example will have two sets of power to power. Again, we know this is power to power because there's an exponent on the outside of the parentheses. For the first parentheses, you will get 25 x squared y squared. For the second parentheses, you will get negative 8 x to the 6th y to the 9th. Now, you will multiply your coefficients and add your exponents. Your final answer will be negative 200 x to the 8th y to the 11th. For this next example, this is monomial times monomial. Make sure you multiply your coefficients and add your exponents. This final example is a set of two power to power parentheses. We know this is power to power, as noted by the exponent on the outside of the parentheses. For the first set, we will raise 2m squared n to the third power. Then, we will take 3m to the third n and raise it to the 4th power. Final step is going to be to multiply your coefficients and add your exponents. This gives you a final answer of 648 m to the 18th n to the 13th.